I'm doing this video because I just had the opportunity to spend a bunch of time juggling between two lenses on my XE1. The two fuji-x lenses that everyone asks about. Which should I get? Well, I'm going to answer that, and you're not going to like the answer. First off, let's take a look at them, and talk a little about what I like. Both are fantastic, but very different from one another. The 27mm f2.8 is a tiny and nearly weightless lens. On the front of the XE1, it is almost as if it isn't there. That makes the camera very almost pocketable. It is very much fanny packable. It feels pretty solid despite this. The little 39mm lens cap goes in the middle, and that isn't the easiest size to find filters for. The lens has a metal mount, just as any XF branded lens should. It is also a joy to use. Even with my first gen X-Trans sensor and its lack of phase detect autofocus, it focuses pretty quick. You're not really going to miss anything, it is fast enough. The focusing ring is focused by wire, which is understandable. The one thing I really like about this lens that other people don't like is the lack of an aperture ring. The little dial on the back of the XE1 is far more intuitive for me than adjusting an aperture ring on the lens. I personally don't care about classic styling or functioning like old cameras. I want something quick and intuitive that doesn't get in my way. The 18-55 f2.8-4 is not a run-of-the-mill kit lens. This is a professional grade optic. It is very sharp. The focal length range is useful and it is very well built. Focusing is a little on the slow side, being one of the first lenses for the fuji-x system, but I didn't really have any issues with it. It was fast enough for me. Granted, I'm used to the Quattro, so yeah. As I mentioned before, having the aperture ring on the lens, for me, was a bit of an annoyance. I looked through the menus to see if I could switch it over to the dial, but I couldn't. I may look deeper into this later, although for what I was doing, the aperture was usually locked in at f5.6 anyway. The zoom is very smooth, and the lens, while much heavier than the 27mm, was nowhere close to anything on the SD Quattro. If you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that that's my primary camera of choice. So I took these two lenses out to the city to get some architectural shots. I just got a space in an art gallery, so I want to start broadening my portfolio and trying out new things. I've always been interested in architecture, and San Francisco has a huge mixture of that, so I went there. I also wanted to formulate a good answer for the age-old question, 18-55 or 27mm. Also, I wanted to try out the Fujifilm film simulation modes, specifically black and white, since I've had this camera for a really long time and I've never really given them any thought. One of the people on my Discord server brought it up, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Maybe I'd be blown away and save some time post-processing this way. After walking around for about 12 hours, I ended up with a lot of shots. Part because I had an objective, which I think is really important when you go out to shoot anything, and part because I had a lot of confidence in that I was going to get the kind of shots and the quality that I wanted with the XE1 and both of these fantastic lenses, and part because I was just so pumped up that I was finally starting my journey as a working professional photographer with a place to market and sell my work. So I took over 500 images. Shooting in black and white was actually a really good thing. Getting rid of the color component really allowed me to focus on the lines and the angles of the buildings and how the light was hitting them. I started out with the 27mm. It kept me very close to the ground. Rather than isolating an interesting part of the building, I was trying to build a sense of scale. I wanted them to look big because, well, they are. The 27mm is small, but it is not a lens cap lens. This thing is legit. It is super sharp, and I was getting great contrast with it. I really like it. But then I switched to the 18-55, and now I could capture so much more. I could get the whole thing, or just the tip. But most of the time I had it at 55mm, and it is also great. But after a while, I got to thinking about why I was almost always at 55mm, other than because I found that I really liked the corners of the buildings. That's because that's about where I started, and what I will forever be used to. When I started shooting digital APS-C, my lens of choice was the Minolta 50mm f1.7, and later the Sigma 50mm f1.4. That's about all I had at the time, so I used it as a walk-around lens. I shot a lot of street, portraiture, anything with those lenses. And pretty much, I was just doing the same thing with the 18-55, it's just the focal length that I'm used to. Which is one reason it's really hard to get an opinion on stuff like that. Chances are you don't have the same habits and preferences I do. I can tell you that on a technical level, the 18-55 is great, and I'll be using it probably long into the future. But should you get it or the 27mm? This is like asking if you should buy a slotted screwdriver or one of those kits that has the handle and all of the little bits. The zoom is a little more fidgety, but it does the same job and more, while the prime is more elegant and will resolve better on 24 megapixel cameras, as I don't think it matters as much on these lower density sensors of the first and second generation. Also, I don't think those asking this question are considering that these are tools designed to do specific jobs and thinking about what kinds of things that they need to do with it. 27mm is, for most people, a weird focal length on APS-C, equating to about 41mm on full frame. So it is narrower and more focused than a 35mm, but less so than a 50mm, two lengths most people are actually pretty used to. I find that this is good for capturing action on the street, and decent as just a whatever walk-around lens. If I were to upgrade to a newer Fuji body, chances are the 27mm would just live on my XE1, so I just have something that takes up almost no space that can be thrown into a bag, and not be used all that much because 27mm is pretty limiting as far as jobs go. It sucks for portraiture, it's too wide. The kinds of architectural things I like to do, usually also too wide. Landscape, too narrow. Street, actually pretty perfect. For me, it's a street and event lens, and that's about it. The 18-55, though, is offered as a kit lens because it can be used for a lot of things. It doesn't really do anything perfectly. Still too wide on the tele end for portraiture for a lot of people, and 18mm isn't too special for landscape, but anyone can pick it up and adapt with it and make it work for a lot of things. So if you're looking for your first Fuji lens and you're a hobbyist photographer that just wants to go out and take photos of the family or the cat or the streets or whatever, just for practice and the sake of making art, the 18-55 is a no-brainer. The inclusion of OS, good OS, just makes this lens amazingly good at a lot of things. If you're a street photographer and have a smaller X-series camera and just want something small and as inconspicuous as possible, the 27mm is the way to go. It's probably about the only lens you'll ever need, other than maybe the supposedly not that great 18mm pancake. It's sharp and tiny and awesome. That's really the only solid recommendation I can make. For everyone else, this is the answer you're not going to like. These are tools. Which one you should buy depends on what you want to do. The screwdriver analogy earlier holds true. If it's the right tool for the job, get it. Personally, I'm glad I have both. If I had to get rid of one, the 27mm would get the axe just because it isn't as useful, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. Oh, and the film simulations. After comparing the film sim JPEG with the raw processed in Capture One, the difference was night and day. You're always going to get a better result if you do it yourself when it comes to processing. When I move up to something with the Acros film sim, I'll try that out, but for now, I'm not that impressed. So, thanks for watching my first Fuji-centric video. Next one will be Foveon, I almost promise. I've been meaning to take the Quattro and the 50-100 to the city to do the same type of architectural photography. I may even take the 60-600 if I'm feeling like extra back pain for the day. Throw me a like if you like this kind of more relevant to more people video, and subscribe for more in the future. Also, join up on my Discord to talk about weirder cameras and forgotten lenses, get your stuff critiqued, etc. We're building a nice little community there. As always, have a good night.